As Taijin's pod moved deeper into the reality field, the universe around him became something entirely new. Colors that had no names painted patterns across space. Gravity flowed like water, creating rivers of starlight that spiraled around his pod. Time itself seemed to breathe, slowing and quickening like a vast heartbeat. But instead of being terrified, Taijin felt a strange sense of recognition. The patterns around him reminded him of his sister Ji Young's paintings, wild and impossible, but filled with emotion that anyone could understand even if they could not explain it. "I can see what you are trying to make," he said aloud, speaking to the artifact as if it were sitting right next to him. "It is beautiful. But you are hurting the people who live here." The artifact's response came not as words or energy patterns, but as images that appeared directly in Taijin's mind. He saw a place that existed in dimensions his brain could not fully process, a realm where thoughts became reality instantly, where emotions took physical form, where the boundary between self and universe did not exist. He saw a young being, curious and playful, exploring this strange new space called physical reality. But everything it tried to create came out wrong. Its thoughts, which should have become beautiful gardens of possibility, instead twisted matter into impossible shapes. Its emotions, which should have painted the void with joy, instead tore holes in the fabric of space-time. The being was not trying to destroy anything. It was a child, lost and alone, trying to make its new home feel familiar. "You are not from here," Taijin said softly. "You are from a place where thinking and being are the same thing. But here you have to be careful. Here, when you dream too hard, you break things." The images in his mind shifted, showing him the being's confusion and sadness. It had been exploring the spaces between dimensions when it accidentally fell through into physical reality. Now it was trapped, unable to return home, unable to create without destroying. Back on the Harmony's edge, the alien scientists were watching readings they had never seen before. The artifact's energy output was stabilizing into patterns that almost made sense. "The quantum fluctuations are becoming coherent," Dr. Velkoth reported, his crystal body flickering with amazement. "The dimensional rifts are actually healing themselves." Dr. Hanarin was studying the communication logs from Taijin's pod. "He is not using any scientific protocols at all. He is just talking to it, like it is a person." "That is because it is a person," Dr. Wongsik said quietly. "Not a human person, not any kind of person we understand, but a thinking, feeling being nonetheless." The Nebulic science officer Zekmar was pulsing with excitement. "If this entity is truly sentient, then first contact protocol should apply. We are witnessing the most important moment in galactic history." Chief Engineer Kyung-mi shook her head in amazement. "And it is being handled by a maintenance engineer with a basic education and a big heart." Inside the reality field, Taijin was learning to communicate with the being in ways he had never imagined. The artifact child, as he had begun thinking of it, could not speak in words. Instead, it shared emotions, memories, and concepts directly through the altered space around his pod. Taijin found himself remembering his own childhood, the loneliness he had felt when his family moved to different stations, the frustration of not understanding why things worked the way they did. He shared these memories with the being, showing it that all intelligent creatures struggled with being alone and confused sometimes. The being responded by showing him its own memories. Vast spaces between stars where reality was fluid, communities of energy beings who painted with cosmic forces, the joy of creation without consequence, but also the terror of falling through a crack in existence and landing somewhere completely alien. "I understand," Taijin said. "You just want to go home. But first we need to fix what you accidentally broke." The process was nothing like the alien scientists had imagined. There were no complex calculations, no advanced energy manipulations, no technological solutions. Instead, Taijin worked with the artifact child like a teacher helping a student understand a difficult lesson. He showed the being how physical reality worked, how matter had rules, how energy had limits, how time moved in only one direction. The being, in turn, showed him how to bend those rules carefully, how to create beauty without breaking the underlying structure of space-time. Together they began to repair the damage. The twisted planets slowly returned to their normal shapes, but they were changed, transformed into works of art that existed in perfect harmony with natural law. Gardens of crystallized music grew where cities had been. Oceans that reflected, starlight from other dimensions filled the valleys. The 6 planets that had been caught in the reality field became something unprecedented. Worlds where the impossible and the real coexisted in perfect balance. "Incredible," whispered Dr. Velkoth. "The gravitational readings are returning to normal, but the aesthetic beauty index is off our measurement scale." Captain Veltar contacted the evacuation fleets. "All ships, the immediate danger has passed. The reality field is now stable and non-threatening." But Taejin was not finished. The artifact child had learned to control its power, but it was still trapped in physical reality. It needed to return to its home dimension before its presence caused more accidental changes. "I do not know how to send you home," Taejin admitted. "That is beyond anything I understand." The being shared its gratitude and understanding. It had learned something important from its time in physical reality, the value of limitation, the beauty that comes from working within rules rather than ignoring them. In return, it wanted to give something back. Working together, Taejin and the artifact child created a gateway between dimensions. But this was not the violent tear that had brought the being to their reality. This was a careful artistic opening, a doorway made of crystallized possibility that would allow the being to return home without damaging the space around it. As the gateway opened, the being prepared to leave. But first, it wanted to thank the humans who had helped it. The 6 transformed planets began to sing, literally sing, their crystallized music creating harmonies that could be heard across the entire system. Dr. Hana-Rin was crying as she listened to the impossible melodies. "It is the most beautiful thing I have ever heard." The artifact child stepped through its gateway, but before it closed, it left one final gift. The knowledge of how to create beautiful impossibilities without breaking reality flowed into the minds of every scientist on every ship in the system. Not as raw information, but as inspiration, the spark of creativity that would drive scientific advancement for generations. The gateway closed with a sound like cosmic wind chimes. The artifact was gone, but the transformed planets remained, along with the memory of what had been accomplished. Taejin piloted his pod back to the Harmony's edge, his mind still buzzing with wonder. He had gone out as a simple mechanic and was returning as the person who had achieved first contact with an interdimensional being. But more than that, he had proven something important about humanity's place in the galaxy. The other races were right that humans were not the strongest or the smartest or the most specialized. But humans had something equally valuable, the ability to connect, to empathize, to find common ground with beings completely unlike themselves. As his pod docked with the ship, Taejin could see the alien scientists gathered in the landing bay. Their faces, or the equivalent expressions for their species, showed amazement, respect, and something he had never expected to see when they looked at him. They were seeing him as an equal. The reality-warping field was growing faster than anyone had expected. Taejin watched from the observation deck as the strange colors spread through space like spilled paint in water. What had been 3 twisted planets yesterday was now 4. A small moon had been caught in the field overnight. Captain Veltar called another emergency meeting. Her crystal body was flashing so fast with worry that it made Taejin's eyes hurt to look at her. "The field is expanding at an increasing rate," she announced to the gathered crew. "Our best calculations show it will reach critical mass in 72 hours. Dr. Hana-Rin raised her hand. "What happens at critical mass?" The purple gas cloud that was Science Officer Zekmar grew darker. "The field will become self-sustaining. It will spread beyond this system and begin consuming inhabited worlds. Billions of lives will be lost." The room fell silent. Taejin felt his stomach drop. 72 hours. That was not much time to save entire worlds. Dr. Velkoth stepped forward, his crystal body now completely red with frustration. We have tried everything. Mathematical analysis shows the artifact creates impossible paradoxes. Our most advanced computers shut down when they try to process the data. Chief Engineer Kyung-mi looked around the room at all the alien scientists. Surely with all our combined knowledge we can find some solution. We have tried combining our approaches, buzzed the Kithara collective mind through their speaker insect. Velthan logic plus Nebulix energy control plus our collective intelligence equals 0 progress. The artifact operates beyond the boundaries of known science. Dr. Wong-sik, who had been studying alien thought patterns for years, spoke up. Maybe we are thinking about this wrong. What if the artifact is not following scientific laws at all? Doctor, Velkoth's red glow grew brighter with anger. Everything in the universe follows scientific laws. That is what makes it the universe. This artifact simply uses laws we do not understand yet. But Tae-jin noticed something in Dr. Wong-sik's words. The maintenance engineer had spent enough time listening to conversations to pick up when someone was on to something important. Dr. Wong-sik had a look in his eyes like he was seeing something the others were missing. After the meeting, the scientists went back to their impossible work. Tae-jin returned to his maintenance duties, but his mind was focused on the growing field outside. Every few hours he would sneak looks at the observation windows. The artifact seemed to pulse with its own rhythm, and the reality distortions around it moved like they were dancing. The Velthans worked without rest, their crystal bodies glowing bright as they calculated millions of possibilities every second. But each calculation ended the same way. Impossible, impossible, impossible. Their perfect logic could not accept something that broke the rules of logic itself. The Nebulix team tried to match the artifact's energy patterns. They made their gas bodies glow and spark in complex formations, trying to create harmony with the strange forces. But every time they got close to matching the artifact's frequency, the pattern would change to something completely different. It was like trying to sing a song that changed its melody every few notes. The Kithara collective linked their minds together into one superbrain that could process information faster than any computer. They analyzed every piece of data from the artifact, looking for hidden patterns or secret codes. But the more they analyzed, the more confused they became. The artifact's behavior seemed random and purposeful at the same time. Meanwhile, evacuation ships were arriving from nearby systems. Tae-jin could see them on the long-range sensors, hundreds of vessels trying to rescue people from the threatened planets. But the space around the artifact was becoming dangerous. Ships that got too close began experiencing their own reality distortions. One rescue vessel had its front half appear in 3 different locations at once before quickly retreating. Dr. Honorin found Tae-jin in his workshop on the second day. She looked like she had not slept at all. Her hair was messy and her eyes were red from staring at computer screens. "We are failing," she said simply, sitting down on a toolbox. "Every approach we try just makes the problem worse. The Velthan computers keep crashing. The Nebulix energy experiments are creating new distortions. The Kithara collective is starting to argue with itself because the data makes no sense." Tae-jin continued working on a broken sensor relay while he listened. His hands moved automatically, finding loose connections and replacing damaged parts. "What does Dr. Wong-sik think?" he asked. "He has some crazy idea that the artifact is not a machine at all. He thinks it might be alive, or at least acting like something alive. But the other scientists will not listen to him. They say he is being too emotional about the problem." Tae-jin paused in his work. "What do you think?" Honorin was quiet for a long time. "I think we are all so focused on being scientific that we might be missing something obvious. But I cannot figure out what." That night, Tae-jin could not sleep again. He walked through the empty halls of the ship, ending up in the observation lounge. Through the large windows he could see the artifact clearly. It was beautiful in a strange way, like a flower made of stars and impossible colors. As he watched, Tae-jin began to notice something the scientists had missed. The artifact's movements were not random. They had a rhythm like music or poetry. The reality distortions around it flowed and changed in patterns that reminded him of something from his childhood. When he was young on Seoul Station Colony, his grandfather had taken him to see traditional Korean dancers. The dancers moved in, ways that seemed impossible, flowing like water but sharp like lightning. Their movements told stories without words, expressed emotions without sounds. The artifact's behavior reminded him of those dancers. It was not calculating or computing, it was expressing something. Over the next day, the situation grew worse. The reality field had consumed 2 more planets and was beginning to affect the nearby star. Solar flares were bending into impossible shapes, and the star's light was changing colors that did not exist in normal space. The evacuation ships were running out of time. Millions of people were still trapped on planets near the expanding field. The rescue operations were becoming more dangerous every hour as space itself became unreliable. In the laboratories, the alien scientists were beginning to give up hope. Dr. Velkoth had stopped calculating probabilities because they all came out as 0. The Nebulix team had exhausted every known form of energy manipulation. The Kithera Collective had actually split into smaller groups because they could not agree on how to process the impossible data. "We need to face reality," Dr. Velkoth announced, to Captain Veltar. "This problem cannot be solved with current knowledge. We should evacuate this system and establish a quarantine zone. Perhaps future generations will develop the technology to understand this phenomenon." Captain Veltar's crystal body was now completely dim with despair. "You are asking me to abandon 3 trillion refugees to their fate. I am asking you to save the rest of the galaxy," Dr. Velkoth replied. "If this field continues to expand, it will eventually consume inhabited systems. We must contain it now, while we still can." But Tae-Jin was not ready to give up. That evening, he made a decision that would change everything. He left his workshop and walked to the communications center. He needed to send a message to someone who might understand what he was beginning to see. The message was simple. "Grandfather, I need to remember everything you taught me about fixing things that seem impossible to fix." He did not expect an answer. Sol Station Colony was too far away, and the communication delay would be several days. But somehow just sending the message made him feel better. It reminded him that he was more than just a mechanic. He was human, and humans had their own way of solving problems. As the ship prepared for what might be its final attempt to understand the artifact, Tae-Jin returned to his maintenance shafts. From there, he could observe everything without being noticed. He watched the alien scientists prepare their last, desperate experiments. He listened to Captain Veltar discuss evacuation procedures with the other ship captains. But mostly, he watched the artifact itself, and the longer he watched, the more convinced he became that Dr. Woong-sik was right. The artifact was not a machine following broken physics. It was something else entirely, something that might just respond to a completely different approach. Fadio, approach of someone who fixed things not by understanding them completely, but by understanding what they needed. Captain Jiho stared at the strange readings on his screen. Nothing made sense anymore. The Defiant Dawn had been exploring the Veil Nebula for 3 weeks, and every day brought new mysteries that hurt his brain to think about. "Nari, come look." At this, he called to his science officer. The woman walked over from her station, her dark hair tied back in a neat ponytail. She had been working non-stop since they entered this region of space. "What is it now, Captain?" Nari asked, though she already looked worried. The past few days had shown them things that should not exist. Stars that pulsed in perfect patterns, space dust that moved in straight lines, planets that seemed to be in 2 places at once. "The gravity readings," Jiho said, pointing at his screen. "Look at Sector 7. The gravity is exactly the same, everywhere. Not almost the same. Exactly the same. Down to the smallest measurement we can make." Nari leaned closer and her eyes went wide. "That's impossible. Gravity changes everywhere in space, even tiny amounts. But this..." She trailed off, her fingers dancing over the controls to run new tests. "Impossible seems to be a common word around here," Jiho muttered. He had been a ship captain for 15 years. He had seen strange things before, but this nebula was different. Everything here followed rules that were too perfect, too clean. "Captain," came a voice from across the bridge. Dongyun, their chief engineer, was hunched over his console. "I'm getting readings from the nebula's edge. Something big, really big. Define big, Jiho said, walking over to look. Like bigger than a solar system big, Dongyun replied. His hands were shaking slightly as he adjusted the sensors. And it's not moving. At all. Perfect stillness. Jiho felt a cold feeling in his stomach. In space, nothing stayed perfectly still. Everything moved, spun, orbited something else. That was how the universe worked. Show me. The main screen flickered and showed what their sensors had found. At first, it looked like empty space. Then the computer enhanced the image, and they could see it. A massive structure so large it stretched beyond what their sensors could measure. It was geometric, made of perfect lines and angles that hurt to look at. What in the hell is that thing? Jiho whispered. I don't know, Donghyun said. But it's giving off energy readings I've never seen before. And Captain, I think it's been watching us. Before Jiho could ask what he meant, another voice spoke. Up. Minji, their communications officer, was pale as she turned from her station. Captain, I'm picking up a signal. It's not like anything in our databases. Play it, Jiho ordered. The bridge filled with sound, but it wasn't quite sound. It, was something that bypassed their ears and spoke directly to their minds. Mathematical concepts flowed through their consciousness, images of vast spaces filled with impossible geometry. And underneath it all, a sense of vast, ancient intelligence. Turn it off, Nari gasped, holding her head. It's too much, Minji. Cut the signal and blessed silence returned to the bridge. Everyone looked shaken. What was that? Jiho asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to know. I think, Nari said slowly, it was a greeting. Or maybe a warning. Over the next few hours, they studied the structure and the signal. What they found changed everything they thought they knew about the universe. The structure isn't just big, Nari explained as the senior staff gathered in the conference room. It's a boundary, like a wall, but in dimensions we can barely understand. A wall around what? Jiho asked. Around us, around everything we've ever known. Nari brought up a holographic display. Look at this. I've been mapping the energy patterns from that signal. They show the shape of our local space. All of it. Every star, every planet, every bit of space dust. The hologram showed their familiar galaxy, but it was contained within a perfect geometric shape, a cage made of mathematics and energy. You're saying we're trapped? Dongyun asked. Not trapped, Nari said. Contained. There's a difference. This isn't a prison made to hurt us. It's more like a protected environment, like how we might keep dangerous animals in a zoo but for their own safety. Are you calling humans dangerous animals? Minji asked with a nervous laugh. I'm saying something thinks we are. Nari replied seriously. Jiho stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the stars. Who could build something like this, and why? I've been analyzing the mathematical concepts from that signal, Nari continued. Whoever built this barrier understands physics in ways we can't imagine. They can shape space itself like we shape clay. And based on the energy signatures, this structure is old. Really old. Maybe millions of years. But why contain us? Dongyun asked. What did we do wrong? Maybe it's not about what we did, Minji said quietly. Maybe it's about what we might do. They spent the rest of the day analyzing everything they had learned. The more they studied, the more questions arose. The barrier wasn't just around their galaxy. It was around their entire local group of galaxies, billions of stars and planets, all contained within this cosmic cage. There's something else, Nari said as they worked late into the ship's night cycle. The physics inside this barrier, they're not natural. What do you mean? Jiho asked. I mean the laws of physics we know, the ones we base all our technology on, they're artificial, imposed, like rules in a game. Nari pulled up more data. Outside this barrier, true space exists, and in true space the rules are different. Matter responds to thought. Energy follows intention. Reality itself can be shaped by consciousness. That's impossible, Dongyun said automatically. Is it? Nari asked. Or is it impossible only because we've been told it's impossible by the rules of this artificial space? Jiho felt the cold feeling in his stomach grow stronger. You're saying someone built this entire region of space as a cage, and they made the laws of physics specifically to limit what we can do. That's exactly what I'm saying. But who would do that? And why? Before Nari could answer, alarms started blaring across the ship. Minji's voice came over the intercom. Captain, to the bridge. We have multiple contacts approaching our position. They ran to the bridge to find the main screen filled with ships, but these weren't like any ships they had ever seen. They seemed to be made of folded space itself, appearing and disappearing as they moved through dimensions the human eye couldn't follow. How many? Jiho demanded. I count 12, Minji reported. But they keep phasing in and out of normal space. There might be more. Are they hostile? Unknown. They're not targeting us, but they're definitely surrounding us. One of the ships moved closer and they could see it more clearly. It was beautiful and terrible at the same time. Its hull seemed to be made of crystallized mathematics, and it pulsed with energy that made reality bend around it. Captain, Nari said, her voice barely a whisper. I think we're about to meet whoever built the cage. A new signal came through, clearer than before but just as alien. This time, however, it came with translation. Words formed in their minds, spoken in a voice that felt older than stars. Young species of the contained realm, you have discovered what you were not meant to know. Prepare for judgment. Jiho looked around at his crew. They were scared, but they weren't backing down. That was what he loved about humans. When faced with the impossible, they didn't run. They stood their ground and figured out how to make the impossible possible. Open a channel, he ordered Minji. Channel open, Captain. Jiho stood tall and spoke to beings that could reshape reality itself. This is Captain Jiho of the human vessel Defiant Dawn. We come in peace, but we come with questions, and we're not leaving until we get answers. The response came back immediately, filled with what might have been surprise. Curious. Most contained. Species beg for mercy when they learn the truth. You demand answers. This bears investigation. And with that, everything Jiho thought he knew about the universe crumbled away, leaving only one certainty. Humanity was about to face its greatest challenge yet. The landing bay was completely silent as Taejin stepped out of his pod. Every alien scientist, every crew member, every officer on the ship was staring at him. Captain Veltar stood at the front of the group, her crystal body glowing brighter than he had ever seen it. Maintenance Engineer Park, she said formally. You have accomplished something that will be remembered for 1,000 years. Taejin felt embarrassed by all the attention. I just talked to someone who needed help, he said quietly. Dr. Velkoth stepped forward, his crystal body no longer flashing red with frustration, but glowing soft blue with amazement. You solved a problem that defeated our greatest minds using methods we never considered. How did you know to approach the entity as a sentient being rather than a phenomenon? Taejin thought about this question. My grandfather always told me that everything has a purpose, even broken things. The artifact was not really broken. It was just lost and scared. When something is lost and scared, you do not study it or fight it. You help it. The nebulic science officer Zekmar floated closer, his purple gas swirling with excitement. You have opened an entirely new field of scientific study, interdimensional communication through empathy rather than technology. The applications are limitless. But Taejin was not thinking about scientific applications. He was thinking about the 6 planets that now sang with crystallized music, and the families who would return to find their homes transformed into something wonderful. Over the next few days, as word of the Meridian incident spread throughout the galaxy, everything changed. Ships arrived from every major world carrying scientists, diplomats, artists, and philosophers who wanted to study what had happened. Taejin found himself giving the same explanation over and over again. No, he had not used any special technology. No, he had not followed any established protocols. Yes, he was really just a maintenance engineer, No, he did not understand exactly how he had communicated with the interdimensional being. The questions grew more complex as the days passed. Leaders from all 12 galactic races wanted to know if humans possessed some hidden ability that made them superior to other species. Military commanders wanted to know if interdimensional communication could be weaponized. Corporate executives wanted to know if the artifact's reality-shaping abilities could be replicated for profit. "I do not think you understand," Taejin told a gathering of Velthan officials. "It was not about being human. It was about being willing to listen with more than just your brain. Any of you could have done the same thing if you had tried." But the officials did not believe him. To them, humans had demonstrated a completely new type of intelligence, the ability to solve problems through emotional connection rather than logical analysis. Within a month, universities across the galaxy were establishing new departments of human integration studies. The basic idea was simple: when facing complex problems that traditional methods could not solve, include humans in the research team. Their unique perspective might reveal solutions that pure logic or specialized knowledge would miss. Dr. Hana Rin was offered positions at the most prestigious research institutions in known space. Dr. Wung Sik became the galaxy's leading expert on non-traditional intelligence patterns. Chief Engineer Kyungmi was promoted to head of interdisciplinary engineering, and Tae-jin was offered everything he could possibly want: positions as ambassador, chief scientist, admiral, or even governor of an entire world. He turned them all down. "I want to keep fixing things," he told Captain Veltar when she asked him about his decision. "That is what I am good at. That is what makes me happy." Captain Veltar's crystal body flickered with what he had learned to recognize as amusement. "But you will not be fixing air filters and water pipes anymore. The Galactic Council has approved funding for a new department aboard this ship, the Creative Problem-Solving Division. You will be its director." Taejin liked the sound of that. "What kind of problems will we solve?" "The impossible ones," Captain Veltar said. "The ones that make our best scientists give up hope. The ones that require a completely different way of thinking." The Creative Problem-Solving Division started small, just Taejin and a few volunteers from different races who were interested in non-traditional approaches. But within a year, they had solved 3 major galactic crises using methods that no one had ever tried before. When the Helix Nebula began emitting signals that drove artificial intelligences insane, Taejin's team discovered that the signals were actually a form of poetry created by a lonely machine intelligence. Instead of blocking the signals, they responded with human poetry, beginning a cultural exchange that enriched both organic and artificial civilizations. When the warlike Corvin race threatened to destroy a peaceful colony over a resource dispute, traditional diplomacy failed completely. But Su Jin, a human artist who had joined Taejin's team, organized a collaborative art project between Corvin warriors and colony children. The Corvin discovered that creating beauty was more satisfying than creating destruction. When a space station's gravity generator began producing gravity that flowed upward, downward, and sideways all at the same time, the engineering teams from 6 different races could not solve the problem. But Byung-ho, a former human soldier on Taejin's team, recognized that the gravity was following the rhythm of an old military marching song. They fixed the problem by teaching the generator a new song with a more sensible beat. Each success brought new requests for help. The Harmony's Edge became the most famous ship in the galaxy, traveling from crisis to crisis and solving problems that seemed impossible until someone looked at them from a completely different angle. But the most important change was not in how problems were solved. It was in how different races began to work together. The old model of each species contributing their specialized abilities was replaced by a new approach that valued diverse perspectives and creative thinking. Humans were no longer seen as the weakest race in the galaxy. They were seen as the bridge builders, the ones who could help different types of intelligence work together to accomplish things that none of them could achieve alone. Tae-jin kept his small workshop aboard the ship, and he still spent time fixing air filters and water pipes. But now he also spent time working with teams of aliens on problems that spanned multiple star systems. And sometimes, late at night when the ship was quiet, he would stand at the observation windows and remember His grandfather's words, "Fix what is broken." He had started by fixing machines. Then he had fixed a relationship between two very different forms of life. Now he was helping to fix the way an entire galaxy thought about cooperation and creativity. 3 years after the Meridian incident, Tai-Jin received a message that made him smile. It came from Sol Station Colony, from his grandfather, who was now very old but still working in his small repair shop. "I heard about what you accomplished," the message said. "I always knew you were special, but I never imagined you would fix something as big as the galaxy's problems. Your parents are proud. Your sister Ji-Young says her art has become more popular since the incident. Apparently humans are considered very fashionable now. But I want you to remember something important. No matter how famous you become, no matter how many impossible problems you solve, you are still the same boy who learned to fix broken things with patience and love. That is your real gift. And it is not something you should ever lose." Tai-Jin read the message twice, then put it in his personal files next to the technical manuals and emergency procedures. Then he picked up his tools and went to fix a loose connection in the ship's communication array. Because someone, somewhere, always needed something fixed. And Park Tai-Jin was very good at fixing things. As he worked in the quiet maintenance shaft, Tai-Jin could hear the ship humming around him. Not just the sound of machines and systems, but the sound of different races working together, learning from each other, solving problems that had once seemed impossible. The galaxy had not become perfect. There were still conflicts, still mysteries, still problems that seemed too big to solve. But now there was something new. The understanding that sometimes the most important solutions came not from the strongest or the smartest, but from those who were willing to listen, to empathize, and to try something that had never been tried before. And in his small way, a maintenance engineer from Sol Station Colony had helped make that possible. Tai-Jin spent the morning in the deepest maintenance shaft of the ship, thinking. Around him he could hear the sounds of the alien scientists preparing for their final attempt to stop the artifact. But his mind was somewhere else entirely, back on Sol Station Colony with his grandfather. His grandfather had been more than just a mechanic. He had been an artist who worked with metal and circuits instead of paint and canvas. "Every broken thing tells you a story," his grandfather had said. "But you have to listen with more than your ears. You have to listen with your heart." At the time, young Tai-Jin had not understood what that meant. Now, watching the artifact through the small window in the maintenance shaft, he was beginning to see it. The artifact was not just breaking the laws of physics, it was creating something. The reality distortions were not random destruction. They were patterns, expressions, art made from the fabric of space itself. But it was art created by something that did not understand the difference between imagination and reality. Tai-Jin made a decision that everyone would think was crazy. He left the maintenance shaft and walked straight to Captain Veltar's quarters. He had never spoken directly to the captain before. Mechanics usually talked to their supervisors, who talked to department heads, who eventually talked to the captain. But there was no time for proper procedure. Captain Veltar's door was open. She was standing in front of a large display showing the evacuation progress. Her crystal body was dim with exhaustion. She had been working without rest for 3 days. "Captain," Tai-Jin said quietly. She turned and her crystal face showed surprise. "Maintenance Engineer Park, how can I help you?" Tai-Jin took a deep breath. "I want to try something different with the artifact, something the other scientists have not tried." Captain Veltar's body flickered with what might have been amusement. "You want to solve a problem that has defeated the greatest minds from 12 different races?" "Yes," Tai-Jin said simply. "What is your approach?" Tai-Jin had practiced this explanation in his head, but it still sounded strange when he said it out loud. "I do not think the artifact is a machine or a weapon. I think it is trying to create something, like an artist or a musician, but it does not understand our reality, so its creations are destroying everything around it." Captain Veltar was quiet for a long moment. Her crystal body stopped flickering and became perfectly still. "Continue. I want to try communicating with it. Not with computers or energy patterns or mathematical formulas. I want to try talking to it the way one artist talks to another. That is, Captain Veltar paused, searching for words. That is not a scientific approach. No, Taijin agreed. It is a human approach. Captain Veltar looked at the display showing the expanding reality field. 6 planets were now twisted into impossible shapes. The evacuation ships were struggling to stay ahead of the growing distortions. The alien scientists have 18 hours left before I must order a full evacuation. If you can do something they cannot, I will give you the chance. I need a maintenance pod and permission to approach the artifact directly. Captain Veltar's crystal body flashed bright red with alarm. That is suicide. No ship has gotten within 1,000 kilometers of the artifact without experiencing severe reality distortions. I am not going to study it or fight it, Taijin said. I am going to try to talk to it. 20 minutes later, Taijin was sitting in Maintenance Pod 7, checking the simple controls for the 100th time. The pod was designed for basics, repairs on the outside of the ship. It had minimal shields, basic propulsion, and a communication array that could barely reach across a solar system. Dr. Hanarin had insisted on coming to the launch bay to see him off. She looked worried and proud at the same time. Are you sure about this, Taijin? No, he said honestly. But I am sure that the normal approaches are not working. Chief Engineer Kyung-mi was there too, along with Dr. Woong-sik. Kyung-mi had tears in her eyes. You do not have to do this. No one expects a maintenance engineer to save the galaxy. Maybe. That is exactly why I can do it, Taijin said. The launch bay doors opened and Taijin piloted the small pod out into space. Behind him, the Harmony's edge looked huge and safe. Ahead of him, the artifact waited like an impossible flower blooming in the darkness. As he got closer to the artifact, Taijin began to feel the reality distortions affecting his pod. The controls started responding in strange ways. The navigation display showed his location in several different places at once. The communication array began picking up sounds that could not exist in the vacuum of space. But instead of fighting these effects, Taijin did something no one expected. He embraced them. When the navigation system showed his pod in multiple locations, he did not try to fix it. Instead, he adjusted his flight path to match the strange readings, turning the pod's movement into a kind of dance through twisted space. When the communication array picked up impossible sounds, he did not shut it off. Instead, he began modulating the pod's own signals in response, creating a conversation made of energy patterns and radio waves. When the pod's sensors showed readings that made no sense, he did not ignore them. Instead, he used them to guide his approach, following the artifact's own rhythm instead of imposing his will upon it. Back on the Harmony's edge, the alien scientists watched in amazement. Dr. Velkoth's crystal body was flashing so fast with confusion that it looked like a strobe light. His approach violates every principle of safe space navigation, he said. But it is working, Dr. Hanarin pointed out. Look at the sensor readings. The reality distortions around his pod are actually stabilizing. The Nebulic science officer Zekmar was pulsing with excitement. The energy patterns around the artifact are changing. They are becoming more organized, less chaotic. The Kythera collective was buzzing with activity as they tried to process what they were seeing. The human is not fighting the distortions, they reported. He is harmonizing with them. This approach was not in any of our calculations. Taijin could feel the change too. The artifact was responding to his approach, but not with hostility or fear. The reality distortions around his pod were shifting into beautiful, crystalline patterns. Space itself was becoming a canvas for something magnificent and strange. And then, for the first time in 4 days, the artifact stopped expanding its field. The impossible colors that had been spreading through space suddenly paused. The twisted planet stopped changing. The evacuation ships found that the dangerous zones around the artifact had become stable. Impossible, whispered Dr. Velkoth. The field expansion has completely stopped. Captain Veltar's crystal body was glowing brighter than anyone had ever seen it. Maintenance Engineer Park, please report your status. Tae-jin's voice came through the communication system, but it sounded different, like he was speaking through water or music. "I am fine, Captain. And I think it is trying to talk to me." The artifact itself began to change. The crystalline flower structure started pulsing with gentle light. The reality distortions around it shifted into patterns that looked almost like writing or music notation or mathematical equations drawn by someone who had never learned mathematics. "What is it saying?" Dr. Hana-Rin asked. There was a long pause before Tae-jin answered. When he spoke, his voice was full of wonder. I think it is lonely." The alien scientists looked at each other in amazement. Loneliness was not a concept they had considered when analyzing the artifact. Their instruments could measure energy, matter, space, and time, but they could not measure emotions. Only a human would think to look for feelings in a force that was reshaping reality itself. "I am going to try to get closer," Tae-jin said. "I think it wants to show me something." As his pod moved deeper into the reality field, the impossible patterns around the artifact grew more complex and beautiful. Space itself became a gallery of wonders that should not exist but somehow did. And for the first time since the crisis began, there was hope.